Welcome back to the Emperor Atheist channel with your host, Emperor Atheist. This particular video is probably going to be done in two parts. I'm going to be dealing with basically non-Christian sources of stories, basically myths of resurrection. The main character that I'm going to be speaking of, basically what I named the video, is Apollonius of Tyana, which most people haven't heard of that, and a lot of historians don't speak of this particular character, who's basically known through history, through Philostratus. Philostratus wrote about him in the 2nd century. But the thing about Apollonius, which believers and non-believers alike should really pay attention to, is the historical comparative life that he had with this same person called Jesus of the New Testament. What I mean by that, him doing miracles, all type of miracles that he did, claims that he did as far as miracles were concerned, and the same claims of the New Testament with Jesus turning water into wine, bullshit like that. Jesus raising people from the dead, Jesus even being raised from the dead himself, like I always speak about. Mythical stories that we just don't see in real life and reality. Things that the 1st century always wrote about. And this is the thing that I want the listeners to pay attention to and the viewers to pay attention to. All of these things that are basically believed from the Bible or even later on from the Quran are just things that archaic men wrote about in the 1st century, 2nd century. Things that we don't see today. And the thing about it, it's not something that was singled out with just Jesus. There was a lot of people who claimed to be messiahs during this particular time, who claimed to be sons of a god, or even going back to Greece and going back to Greek mythology with Zeus, and Hercules, and Phrades, and all of these different mythologies, where the Greek pantheon and ancient African pantheons as well had all of these god myths that basically had children with humans. So when you look at the Virgin Mary story, and you look at these myths, it's nothing new. It's not like it's an original thought. It seems like an all-powerful, all-knowing God would have had an original thought at least, and he wouldn't have borrowed a particular ideology from pagans or people who they called pagans or whatever the term you want to damn use, heathens or whatever. But when you go to the 1st century, especially the 1st century when Rome was ruling the world, and you look at the story of Apollonius of Tyana, Apollonius was a very wise person. You look at his writings. Not only did Philostratus speak about him, but there were different people during Roman history who actually mentioned Apollonius. But this is the strange thing about Apollonius, and I'm going to get into other characters who actually followers believe they was actually resurrected. But this is the strange thing about Apollonius. Apollonius' followers called Christ, and this is during the 1st and 2nd century, actually called Jesus Christ a forgery, called him phony. But now in the writings of Apollonius, which is even more kind of weird to me, Jesus Christ is never mentioned. And, vice versa, in the writings of the New Testament, Apollonius is never mentioned. Now, Apollonius was born in the turn of the 1st century. Apollonius was born around the same time that this so-called Jesus was supposed to be born, which was around 4 BC. Now, it's kind of strange that both of these guys were contemporaries. Both of them were doing miracles. Both of them was walking around, had followers. Both of them was considered to be divine or sons of God. But neither one of the writers of each never mentioned each other. So I think historically that's kind of problematic for Christians. And the reason I say it's problematic for Christians is because there's no religion, or there's no set religion today of people who are worshiping Apollonius. So the thing would be, obviously, then, that the competition didn't last for centuries. So why did not the writers of Apollonius mention Jesus? If Jesus had actually done all the things that the New Testament claims it does, it seemed like Jesus would have been mentioned somewhere in that particular point. But as I've always stated in other videos, and other scholars, especially people like Bart Ehrman, mentioned that no contemporary historian ever mentions Jesus Christ, which is strange when we know we had contemporary historians during this particular time period. People like Philo of Judea, we had Seneca, you had Pliny the Elder. All of these were historians who recorded things that was going on during the 1st century. This is the same time that Jesus supposed to have fed 4,000 and 5,000 people with fish and bread and all this bullshit, turned water into wine, died on the cross, graves popping open, where people was coming to see people in Matthew 27. All of these things were things that is nowhere in hell historians should have missed, because you got dead people popping up out of the grave going to the city to see people. That means you had more and more eyewitnesses who would have bear witness to these things, and somebody in that particular area of Judea or Canaan or wherever the hell the story takes place according to the Bible, Galilee, Nazareth, some historian would have took part in that. Josephus never mentions it. Tacitus of Rome never mentions anything like this. So basically the point I'm making that these particular myths are only found within the writer's book of the New Testament. So they can't be proven by a historian. But this is the thing why I'm bringing up Apollonius of Tyana. Because if Christians believe the myth that's surrounded around Jesus, as far as the miracles he did, walking on water, and all this bullshit that goes against all the laws of physics, and raising people from the dead, as he raised Jairus' daughter from the dead. Himself, he was raised from the dead. He raised Lazarus from the dead, the brother of Martha and Mary. So that these three people alone that he raised from the dead, stuff that you just don't see today. If Christians believe this stuff, or Muslims, or whoever believe in this type of supernatural crap, then why should they reject the same myths that surround the people who lived during his same time period, like Apollonius of Tyana? It seems as though, what basis would you reject the claims from Philostratus and still accept the claims from the authors of the New Testament, with whom I must always make a point that you have no idea who Matthew was, you have no idea who Luke was, who you have no idea who these Testament authors were, because once again, going back to the biblical history, there were no names on these four Gospels. So what you have today when you see Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, these were names that were put on these particular Gospels later by the church forefathers, people like Eusebius and St. Jerome. So we have no historicity of who the people who wrote these damn New Testament. These people are missing from the historical canon. So my question is to Christians, and hopefully you don't commit intellectual suicide in trying to answer this question. What basis do you have to accept the myth surrounding the story of Jesus, but reject other myths surrounding people who lived during the same time period, who claim the same divinity that your Jesus Christ is claiming? Now, this is the funny thing about it. Not only was Apollonius of Tyana mirrored with Jesus and having the same claims of miraculous things, but even people before Jesus, historical people that we know existed for real, people like Caesar, Julius Caesar, Caesar Claudius. These people, now these people never, it was never any claim around these particular people as being resurrected from the dead or nothing like that. But there were claims of comets, and these are followers of these particular. In other words, when Julius Caesar died, people during that particular time believed that comets came and took his soul and went back into the heaven, into the Greek gods. Now these were real people. These are not like mythical beings like Hercules or Venus. Or Julius Caesar was the ruler of Rome. I mean, he's known through history as being a real historical person. But the thing about it, his life was clouded with myth. People during this time period were very religious and into Greek myth, and they believed that Zeus was real. And you got to think about it. You're talking about 2,000 years ago. The gods that are worshipped now, Allah, Islam wasn't even thought of then. Christianity was a baby. So the Greek pantheon was the rule of the world. I mean, everybody believed that way. So the myth around the Greek gods died out after 400 or 500 years later, or thousands of years. And the thing about it, Christians today believe in their God. But the thing about it, you have no evidence to show that your God is any more authentic than Zeus, than the gods that these people believed in, that millions of people believed in 2,000 years ago. You have no evidence to show that your God is any more authentic than those gods. And then go back before the Grecian pantheon. You have the Egyptians who believed in Ra, Amun-Ra, or Hathor, the Mayat, and all of the symbolisms that you see in Egypt. And everybody knows that Egypt had a long history of different ceremonial concepts of what is called the nature, or what people call the nature forces, which we get the term nature from, as being forces or things that created out of water, out of Pet, or the waters of Noon. All of these particular concepts you can basically see in the Bible with Moses, and how Moses was found as a baby in the water by the Pharaoh and raised by the Pharaoh's daughter, and all these things. But yet we can't find no historicity of Moses. So these stories, or whoever wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, seem to be basically plagiarizing concepts from ancient sources. Not only Egypt, but they plagiarized ancient sources. When you talk about the code of Hammurabi, you're talking about ancient Sumerian religions. And I've already made a couple of videos dealing with Noah's flood, and how Noah's flood was basically plagiarized from the Epic of Gilgamesh, and how it was not an original idea about God telling the man to get on a boat to save himself. This was not an original idea. And I mean, you can even just go, and that's a good thing about technology now and about computers. You can actually, you don't have to go to a physical library. You can just go right online, pull up major libraries, Britannica Encyclopedias, Cambridge Online Library, different libraries. Ohio State University has a good online library to go search for ancient religious material. You can go anywhere now and pull these things up. You can actually see what the Epic of Gilgamesh said, and you can see the parallel and how old this book was. It's older than the Bible by thousands of years. And most religious people don't think anything is older than their Bible, because they've been indoctrinated to believe that what they have is the word of some god, some sky daddy that they believe in. But Apollonius of Tyana and Philostratus cannot really be ignored by believers. And I try to mention these things. And I try not to make the board a video or to make people, I don't want to, make a lecture out of it. But it's a point to be made. And it's just a simple question I want to ask religious people. And I mentioned this in my book too, and I'm still procrastinating with finishing it. But I mentioned this in my book about Apollonius of Tyana. I mentioned Rabbi Judah. Now, Rabbi Judah is a known historical person who actually was a writer of the Mishnah and the Talmudic writings of the Jews. But his followers, and he only lived just 100 years after the so-called Jesus Christ. Rabbi Judah followers believed that he was resurrected and used to come back to after he died. He died on the day of Yom Kippur, which is some of you may know is a very popular Jewish holiday. And he died on this particular day. And after he died, he would come back to his house every Sabbath around midnight. And this was what his believers had been saying for hundreds and hundreds. Believers, some people still believe this, and said that he was the Messiah. And the Jews did not accept Jesus Christ as being Messiah, but they said Rabbi Judah was Messiah, who his nickname, he was also called the Prince of Judah. Now, Christian scholars don't talk about this either. And you have to wonder why. Why do they just separate or just make Jesus like this lone person who had this supernatural story about him? And it wasn't true. Rabbi Judah was one. Then you had Kabir. Kabir was this Indian Muslim mystic. Yeah, it's confusing. Kabir, for those who are not familiar with Kabir, he was a Hindu, but he was born to a Muslim family. So both the Hindus of India and the Muslim traditions accept him. As a matter of fact, the tradition around Kabir is when he died, said that the Hindus and the Muslims had this big argument, who's going to bury him. Of course, the Hindus are known for cremation, and the Muslims, they have their burial right where they wrap up in a certain type of cloth. Well, they was arguing over, according to the legend, they was arguing over how or who was going to bury him. Well, the Hindu was going to bury him, or the Muslims going to bury him. Well, anyway, as they looked into the so-called coffin where he was laying at a particular time, they say his body was gone, and just a bunch of flowers that he liked, was inside of this coffin. So they say he walked up on him. He's resurrected. This is his resurrected body. Walked up to him and told him, gave the Hindus and the Muslims both preparations of how he wanted them to bury him. So of course we know this is bullshit, but this is the legend surrounding Kabir and him resurrecting just to tell the Hindus and the Muslims how to prepare his funeral. Yeah, this is the story. I mean, just go check it out. But this is another person, a known historical person that has supernatural legends surrounding his life. And this is basically what happens with, and like I say, I don't fall up under too much of being a Christ mythicist. And as far as being a Christ mythicist, like Robert Price, good friend of mine who wrote plenty of books on Christ being a myth and not even being a historical character at all. Like I say, I don't get off into that if Christ was actually a historical person. I don't give a damn, because either way, if Jesus was a historical person, he ain't done shit for me. So it is irrelevant to me. But people like Richard Carrier, who's a PhD historian, he's more he's more gripped to talk about that. I'm not a PhD. I don't have a PhD holding degree in history, but I do understand historical method. So I don't get caught up in if this Jesus Christ was a real person or not. But I do understand biblical texts, New Testament texts, how they contradict each other, how no original text has ever been found in the New Testament or Old Testament. I've been studying the Bible for years, for over 30 years really, since I was young. So I understand texts. I understand how they work. I understand things have been forged into the New Testament, things that Christian scholars cannot reconcile. They can't even debate. It's really undebatable about how the Bible is thwarted, how it's been certain things have been added to it. Like I've made points and videos on inserted Trinitarian verses, how the Trinity and the whole concept of the Trinity, 1 John 5:7, was inserted. It was not in the original earliest manuscripts or witnesses of the so-called. The whole pericope story of the woman who was, the whole story of John 7 and John chapter 7, chapter 8 of the so-called woman who was being stoned to death because she was an adulteress. And y'all know the damn story of Jesus telling whoever was out sin, cast the first stone. Well, of course, y'all know this was not in the earliest manuscripts. It was added hundreds of years later to the New Testament and canonized inside the King James Version. And most believers don't understand this and don't know this. That's why within the last 10, 15 years, a lot of the NIV versions and biblical versions have basically been forced to start putting these things into their footnotes. So if you get like study Bibles like C.I. Scofield, the Nelson Bible, you'll actually see this in the footnotes. They're real small, red print, hardly can't goddamn read footnotes, but they're there. And I don't think that makes much of a difference, because most religious people suffer from cognitive dissonance anyway. It's kind of evidence don't really mean shit to them, because believing in myths it takes belief and faith. Knowledge is really irrelevant to religious people. But I make these videos and I want to do my talk because I know some people I can reach. But for the most part, I understand how it works, because I've been religious most all my life, and I know how hard it was for me to actually face the news and to realize that, damn, all this shit I grew up with was fucking fake. It wasn't real. But for the most part, Rabbi Judah, Kabir, then you have a Jewish, who they considered a Messiah around the 16th, 17th century, called Sabbatai Tzvi. And Sabbatai Tzvi also had this resurrection story around him. He was supposed to have been this long-awaited Messiah, even though this is closer up to our part. But the basic premise that I'm trying to make is that these were historical people who followers, after they died, made up all this bullshit about them. And I guess I could even go use the Asian teacher, Confucius. Confucius, all of the things that were basically said about Confucius were things said about his followers after he died. Confucius never claimed divinity during his life. In actuality, Jesus really didn't claim it. But that's a whole nother story altogether. But Confucius is just a good example. I'm glad I just thought of it. Confucius never claimed divinity in his own biographies. All of the divinity that came with Confucianism was the bullshit that his followers put on his life or added to his life years after he died. And people ought to be able to see these patterns in cult-like things. Christianity is a fucking cult. Islam is a cult. And a lot of the things that are added to the religions are added after the so-called leaders of these particular cults are dead. Now you have some cults where the leaders are actually just straight up cult leaders. Like I know y'all from Jim Jones in California, the shit he did. The Heaven's Gate, where this cracker was somewhere in Wisconsin or somewhere. He told people to just kill themselves because the UFO was coming to pick them up. Crazy guy. I mean, you have certain incidents like that, but for the most part, in ancient times, the people didn't actually make themselves, or what we call apotheosis. This didn't happen to them until after they died. They became divine. Same thing with Julius Caesar. The followers after, Julius Caesar never claimed anything like this, but after Julius Caesar and Claudius and all of these Roman, some of these Roman emperors died, then their followers said, "Oh, we saw a comet. We saw his soul go up into heaven." All this type crazy stuff, and these are things that happen after the death. But the thing about it is, when looking at all of the, then you have Lahiri Messiah, who was a so-called master yoga teacher, who learned from the Mahatma Bobby, matter of fact, of India. Same thing, same stories around him. Said he came back, he was resurrected, and he told his followers he would be resurrected because he was the last master yoga, and all of this crazy shit. And people believe it. He still have followers today that believe that he was resurrected. So Jesus Christ is not the only, I would say, holy character that is claimed to be resurrected by his followers. Christianity is just the most popular one. But being the most popular doesn't make it real or any more authentic. Just because a religion has survived doesn't make it real. Because if that's the case, then, and this is what a lot of opponents try to say when dealing with Apollonius of Tyana. They say, well, Christianity survived. Why didn't the cult of Apollonius survive? Or why didn't the cult of Mithraism survive? Because the church at that particular time, Rome had already accepted Christianity during this time. And I'm talking about before the 3rd century, before the time of Constantine and all of these, and the Nicene Council. So in the Nicene Council, even before the Nicene Council, when the Jesus Creed was accepted, and I don't know if a lot of y'all are familiar with the Nicene Council, but there was two Nicene councils. One done in the 4th century AD, and one done, I think, like 160 some years later. But there was two that actually crafted the modern day belief and the acts of what Christians actually believe now. But what people don't understand, the Christians at the particular time had power of writing and printing. So these other religions were automatically cast out because all of the writing and printing was done from the Jesus perspective. So this was the new most popular cult that took over from Mithraism, took over from the Apollonius cults, took over from Arianism, took over from all these things in the 1st, 2nd century AD. But and it eventually won out. Christianity won out. But this in no way gives it authenticity. Same thing with Islam. Islam came along. This Prophet Muhammad claimed to had been unread and couldn't read or write, and say he went into this damn cave, and he really received some revelation from Angel Gabriel, and went back and told the people, "Hey, I'm a prophet. This angel came to me, and I wrote this thing down. It's called the Quran." People say, "Oh, he's a prophet. Prophesies in the Bible." And Islam didn't die. Islam thrived, and it's still the fastest growing religion in the world. So just by that concept alone, how Christian scholars try to make it seem just because a religion thrived means it's authentic. Well, if that's the case, then Islam is more authentic than Christianity, because Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world and have been for the last 20 years. So just by that logic alone, then all Christians should convert to Islam right now. So just showing you how stupid that logic is thinking, because something survived. The Catholic Church, which has more members than anybody, doesn't even believe the same way Christians or Muslims believe, but yet they have the most members. The Roman Catholic Church is the biggest organization in the world and the richest organization in the world, and they pray to Mary. So numbers and thriving doesn't mean that you're correct. It doesn't matter at all. That's a logical fallacy. It's called ad populum fallacy. It doesn't make a difference just because there's 100 fools in the room doesn't mean that the 3 people who disagree with the 100 damn fools are wrong, or it doesn't mean that 100 fools are right. So a number of people growing or thriving don't mean that they are correct. So that is irrelevant. As a matter of fact, just going on the logic of the Bible alone, even Jesus, so-called Jesus, said that the road that leads to destruction is the broad road, and the narrow road leads to everlasting life. So in other words, even your own Jesus said that it's the little bitty road, or the small population, that would make it, going against the big population. So the broad road is the road you don't want to damn be on. So thank God I'm an atheist, and we are a very small minority. So that's the side I want to be on, the small one. But I'm going to eventually have to make a part 2 to this video, because there's a lot of history that I didn't get into on Rabbi Judah, and a lot of writings on Apollonius, and actually the comparative part with Jesus. And most Christians, scholars, they can't answer this as far as why should you disregard the claims of these people in the first century, but say that your claims of Jesus is real history, which we know it's not. We know history don't agree with it. We know it's something that can't be proven. It's what you call it unfalsifiable. So something, it just can't be. It can't be falsified, and it can't be proven. And what I mean by unfalsifiable, some people ask me, what do you mean by that? Unfalsifiable is something, if I tell you that pink unicorns live on Saturn's ring, you can't disprove what I said. It's a logical fallacy. It's something that can't just be, it can't be falsified. It's unfalsifiable. So when you talk about God, you talk about the resurrection of Jesus, something that can't be proven historically, it's an unfalsifiable thing. It's something that I can say, and actually, if I make the assertion, then I have the burden of proof. The burden of proof on me to prove it. But most Christians who don't understand the burden of proof, who claim that not just Christians, religious people and all, who believe in this God, believe that this God created the heavens and the earth and all this bullshit and the light, the burden of proof is on them to prove that God. The burden of proof is not on atheists or agnostics to disprove them. You make the claim, then the burden of proof is on you to prove your assertion. It's the same way. If I say pink unicorns live on the ring of Saturn, I made the assertion. The burden of proof is on me to prove it, because you definitely can't disprove what I said. I can say anything I want. I can make unfalsifiable claims. No one can disprove it. No scientist, no one can disprove it. It's like the teacup fallacy. The teacup just floating around in space. You can't. If I say it's a teacup floating around in space, how can you disprove that? You can't. It's unfalsifiable. So you have to avoid these type of circular reasoning, circular arguments that Christians do. And this is what they do, because the Bible is a circular argument of itself. And I just had a dialogue on Facebook where a person was talking about the resurrection of Christ and the purpose. And I made a statement. I said that if Jesus, I said, why would Jesus' sacrifice mean something to the human race if he didn't stay dead? I said it's a phony sacrifice. For someone to say that they died for the sins of the world, but you already know your sky daddy, who is all powerful, is going to raise you up on the third day and you're going to be alive again, then you're kind of cheating to me. I think that if you're going to die for somebody, then the ultimate sacrifice was to stay dead. Then you would show the people, hey man, he died for my sins. Like the people I see have died for people that are still dead. Martin Luther King have died for civil rights. Malcolm, these people have died for a cause. Jesus didn't really die. If he only was dead 3 days and was resurrected with the bunny rabbit and the egg, then what was the point of the sacrifice? So when thinking about things like that, and actually using your logic and reason, it's a cheat for Jesus to be all powerful and his Father in heaven to be all powerful. He only died for 3 days and then he came back to life. I mean, it kind of defeats the purpose to me. It's like saying, well, the Bible is true because the Bible says it's true. That's circular reasoning. That's rhetoric. And this is what I was explaining in that. Because a person tried to use Psalm 22 to prove that the reason why Jesus didn't stay dead, or the reason why he should have resurrected, because in other words, since Psalm 22 so-called prophesies a servant suffering, then that's reason to believe that Jesus should have resurrected. But that's not proof, because you can't use a book to prove a book, the same book. That's circular reasoning. That's a fallacy. That's begging the question. That's a fallacious argument. But like I said, I'm probably going to do a part 2 to this, which won't be as long anyway. So because this is a good topic for people to actually speak on. But once again, man, thanks for all my views. Thanks for all my likes and all my shares. I'm Atheist. I'm out. Peace.